I would rather struggle alone. That sentence lives in a lot of people. They would never say it out loud, but they live it every single day. In every problem they solve by themselves. In every moment they say fine when they mean the opposite. In every time they watched someone offer a hand and quietly, politely turned it away. Most people call that strength. It is not strength. It is a decision that was made a long time ago by someone who had very good reasons for making it, and it has been running things ever since. This is not about personality type. It is not about being introverted or private or self-sufficient by nature. The person who never asks for help is not simply wired that way. They were shaped that way by experiences that taught them specific things about what happens when you show need, about what it costs to be vulnerable, about whether the people around you can actually be trusted to show up when you are not okay. Those lessons came early. They came from real moments, and they left marks that most people are still living inside without fully realizing it. Carl Jung, one of the most important figures in the history of psychology, wrote about the parts of ourselves we learn to hide from the world. He called it the shadow, the aspects of who we are that we decided were unacceptable and buried somewhere deep where they would not cause problems. For people who never ask for help, need itself became part of that shadow. The wanting of support, the admission of struggle, the simple human act of saying, I cannot do this alone. These things got filed away as dangerous, as weakness, as something to be managed and hidden and never shown to another person. And what Jung understood about buried things is that they do not disappear. They go underground. And from underground, they shape everything. Every decision made from a place of, I do not need anyone. Every relationship kept at exactly the distance required to feel safe. Every moment of struggle handled alone. Not because it was the best way, but because it was the only way that felt possible. The shadow does not stay buried forever. It leaks. Through exhaustion. Through walls that quietly push people away. Through a loneliness so familiar it stopped feeling like a problem a long time ago. That loneliness starts forming early. Children who asked for help and were met with frustration learned that asking was a burden. Children who cried and were told to stop being so sensitive learned that their feelings were inconvenient. Children who needed comfort and found nobody there learned that the need itself was the problem. Not the situation, not the difficulty, the need. And so they did what children always do when they need to survive inside a system that cannot meet them. They adapted. They stopped showing the need. They got very good at appearing fine, and appearing fine became the only version of themselves they knew how to be. Some children learn it from chaos, from homes where a parent's mood determined the safety of the whole house, where keeping people comfortable was a survival strategy and not just a preference, where reading the room was not a social skill, but a necessity that got practiced every single day. These children became experts at anticipating what other people needed before it was asked for, at absorbing tension before it became conflict, at making themselves small and easy and low maintenance. And they carried all of that expertise into adulthood without anyone ever telling them that they were allowed to put it down. Others learn it more quietly, from homes that looked perfectly fine from the outside, from conditional love that was given when they performed well and withdrawn when they did not. From the unspoken rule that problems were handled privately and struggle was not something you put on display. These children did not grow up in obvious chaos. They grew up in a kind of invisible pressure. The pressure to always be okay, to never need too much, to handle things. And that pressure became so normal, so much a part of the air they breathed, that they stopped noticing it was there at all. Whatever the specific origin, the result is the same. A person who moves through the world with a wall around their struggle, who responds to, are you okay with fine, even when fine is the furthest thing from the truth, who develops an almost impressive ability to handle everything alone, who builds systems and routines and backup plans specifically designed to minimize the chance they will ever have to depend on someone else. Not because they do not want connection, but because connection that requires showing need feels like too much of a risk, and they have already decided without always knowing they decided it that the risk is not worth taking. That wall shows up in very specific ways in their relationships. The people who love someone who never asks for help often feel it. They notice that something is being kept back. They offer support and get met with, I am fine. They try to be there and are quietly, politely, consistently turned away. Over time, some of them stop trying. Not because they stopped caring, but because being consistently turned away is its own kind of pain. And so, the person who could not show need ends up with exactly what they feared most: people who stopped reaching, a distance they created themselves by trying to protect themselves from distance. And it does not just affect the people around them, it affects how they experience themselves from the inside. People who never ask for help become increasingly unable to tolerate their own struggle, because struggle means needing help, and needing help is not allowed. So when something is hard, they do not sit with it. They fix it, or they push through it, or they bury it under productivity and motion and the business of managing everything. They have almost no capacity for simply being in difficulty without immediately moving to resolve it. And a person who cannot be in difficulty cannot fully be in life. Because life is full of difficulty that does not resolve on a timeline you can control. That inability to sit with struggle shows up in the body too. The tension that lives in their shoulders and never fully releases. The sleep that never feels deep enough. The low-level fatigue that has no obvious cause because the cause is invisible. It is the cost of constant self-management, of never putting the weight down, of spending years handling everything privately while presenting a version of yourself that looks completely fine. The body does not lie the way the mind does. And a body that has been carrying suppressed need for long enough will eventually find a way to make itself heard, whether the mind is ready to listen or not. There is also something specific that happens with other people's struggles. People who never ask for help are often extraordinarily good at supporting others. Patient, present, genuinely helpful. They show up for people in ways that nobody shows up for them, partly because they genuinely care, and partly because being the helper is the one role that does not require them to be vulnerable. It keeps them on the safe side of the dynamic, the side where they are needed rather than needing, where they are strong rather than struggling, where the wall stays up and the help flows in one direction, and nothing is ever asked of them that they are not fully equipped to give. But giving without receiving is not balance. It is a slow drain, and people who never ask for help while continuously showing up for others will eventually hit a point where the tank is empty and there is nobody to refill it, because they never let anyone. Because every time someone tried, they said, "I am fine." Because the very relationships that could have sustained them were kept at exactly the distance required to feel safe. And safety, when it is built on walls rather than trust, is just another word for loneliness. A loneliness so familiar and so constant that it stopped feeling like something worth questioning a long time ago. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with all of this. Not physical tiredness, something deeper. The exhaustion of always being the one who handles it, of never putting the weight down, of carrying everything with no expectation that anyone will offer to take some of it, of watching other people lean on each other and feeling not envy exactly but something close to it. A quiet recognition of something they have never allowed themselves to have, not because it was not available, but because they decided before they even knew they were deciding that they were not the kind of person who got to have it. And what makes it so hard to see is that it is constantly being rewarded. The person who never asks for help gets called strong, gets called dependable, gets called the one everyone can count on. They are praised for their self-sufficiency in a culture that treats independence as the highest virtue and need as something to be overcome. Every time someone says, "I do not know how you do it all," they get a small confirmation that the wall is working, that the performance of strength is being received exactly as intended, that nobody can see what it is actually costing them. And that is exactly the problem, because the cost is real, whether it is visible or not. It is in the relationships that stay shallow, because depth requires showing the parts they keep hidden. It is in the loneliness that sits underneath a full and functioning life. It is in the exhaustion that has no name, because naming it would mean admitting it. It is in the quiet grief of moving through the world, feeling fundamentally alone in your struggle, even when you are surrounded by people who would help if you let them. People who have been waiting, some of them for years, for you to finally say the words, "I need help." 3 words. The hardest 3 words in the language for a person who learned that saying them was not safe. And the tragedy is not just that they cannot say those words. The tragedy is that they have spent so long not saying them that they have started to believe they do not need to. that they have built a life solid enough, managed enough, controlled enough that the need has been successfully removed from the equation. But it has not been removed, it has just been buried. And buried things do not stay buried. They wait, and the longer they wait, the more space they quietly take up. In the tension that never releases, in the walls that keep getting higher, in the life that looks full from the outside and feels quietly, persistently empty from the inside. The breaking point when it comes is usually not gradual. It is a moment, a loss, a failure too big to handle alone, a health problem that cannot be managed in private, a relationship that ends because the distance finally became too much for the other person to stay in. Whatever the specific form the crisis does, the thing that ordinary life never could, it makes the wall impossible to maintain. It forces the need out into the open where it cannot be managed or buried or fixed before anyone sees it. And in that moment, exposed and unable to perform fine, they discover something that surprises them. That the world does not end when they are seen struggling. That people do not leave, that some of them actually move closer. But even that discovery does not undo the pattern overnight. Because the pattern is not just a behavior, it is a belief. A deep-seated belief that needing is weakness, and weakness is dangerous. And dangerous means alone. And beliefs that were built from real experiences do not dissolve just because one new experience contradicts them. They require something more sustained, more repeated, more evidence gathered slowly over time that the old belief was built on something that no longer applies, that the environment that made asking for help unsafe no longer exists, that the people around them now are not the same as the people who taught them that lesson in the first place. Jung called the process of becoming fully yourself individuation. The slow, lifelong work of integrating the parts you have hidden and the parts you have performed and the parts that were shaped by other people's needs into something whole and honest. For the person who never asks for help, that process requires something very specific. It requires letting the need back in, not performing it, not announcing it dramatically, just allowing it to exist without immediately trying to manage it away. Acknowledging that needing things is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is the most human thing there is. And the first step is smaller than you think. It does not require a big conversation. It does not require tearing the wall down all at once. It starts with something almost invisible. Letting someone carry one small thing for you. Saying actually, I could use some help with this instead of I have got it. Answering, are you okay with something other than fine just once? Letting someone sit with you in something difficult instead of handling it in private before they can see it. These are not dramatic gestures. They are tiny cracks in something that has been sealed shut for a very long time. And tiny cracks let light in. There is also something worth naming about the story they tell themselves about why they never ask. It is usually framed as not wanting to be a burden, as protecting the people around them from having to carry something that is not theirs to carry. And that framing feels generous. It feels selfless. But underneath it is actually about control, about making sure nobody ever sees them in a position of need. And the people around them, the ones who have been quietly waiting on the other side of the wall, are not waiting to judge them for needing something. They are waiting to finally be let in. They are more ready for it than they think. Because what the person who never asks for help does not fully see is what their wall costs the people who love them. It is not just the person inside the wall who is lonely. The people on the outside are lonely too. They sense something is being kept back. They offer and get turned away. They care deeply and are given no way to show it. Letting someone help you is not just about you. It is about giving the people who love you somewhere to put what they feel for you. It is about making the relationship real in both directions. And that is not weakness. That is one of the most generous things you can do for someone who cares about you. The decision that started all of this was made by a younger version of you who had very good reasons for making it, who had already learned what happened when they showed need, who had already experienced the disappointment or the dismissal or the absence that taught them the lesson. That younger version was not wrong to protect themselves. They were doing exactly what they needed to do to get through. But you are not in that situation anymore. The people around you now are not the same people. The world you are living in now is not the same world. And the protection that kept you safe then is the very thing keeping you from the life you could actually be living now. So the next time something is hard, and something will be hard, just pause before the automatic "I have got it." Pause before the fine. Pause before you close the door and handle it alone the way you always have. You do not have to say everything. You do not have to take the wall down all at once. You just have to leave it open a crack. Just enough for someone to get through. Just enough to let one person in. The shadow Jung wrote about. The need that got buried. The help that was never asked for. It does not need to stay buried anymore. You have been strong enough for long enough. It is okay to let someone else carry some of it now. It is more than okay. It is exactly what you deserve.